Now, I absolutely love to work on a big, epic scale, but big paintings don't just happen. They're the result of countless hours working really small. Now, in this video, I want to share with you my initial color studies. This is the first part of the painting process, working on a tiny little scale to really get the idea worked out and know where the big project's going. I've got some references, I've got a load of ideas for these series that I want to do, and I'm just going to be shooting from the hip with these little color studies, just like Clint. Except, these are probably going to look way cooler. And by the end of this video, you're going to see more little paintings in one video than I've ever uploaded on my channel. Let's get after it. Roll that intro. Hi there and welcome back to the studio. My name's Andrew. It is an absolute pleasure to have your company here. Now, if you're new to this channel, this is the place where we talk about all things to do with art or drawing in my series on Sketch Endeavor or digital art in the new series Sketch Zone. So consider subscribing. Now, it's the start of a new year and I've got so many ideas in my head and I want to start off right. So I've got to get everything that's up here onto the canvas, but I don't want to just start a whole bunch of paintings. I want to get the ideas down clearly first. So what I'm going to do is take a loose sheet of linen. I'm going to mask off some little squares and rectangles all around about 10 centimeters to 12 centimeters, maybe 15 at the largest. And I'm going to come up with a series of 12 little paintings. Now, I'm splitting this into three. I've got a series of mountains I want to do, I've got some Venice paintings I want to do, and I've also got some seascapes that I really want to do. But first, I just need to work out that idea small so I can see it, get my head clear, get that idea down. And I'm only going to spend about an hour for each of these little sketches, and by the time these sketches are finished, then I'll know what I want to do with that composition. I'll probably upload them into Photoshop, manipulate them, or go old school and get back to the drawing board and just sketch it out by hand. Now, before we get into this video, right now on my Patreon page, you're going to find an extended time lapse of a series of little seascape color studies that aren't going to be found anywhere else. It's right now on my Patreon page. You can find that by clicking the link in the description down below. So without further ado, let's get painting. I've got quite a bit of reference material and it's easy to get overwhelmed with an abundance of imagery. But here, what I want to focus on is those mountains with that rising mist and a strong sense of light. I'm working the same way I'd probably work up the bigger painting, starting with those furthest reaches and bringing the depth forward. And here, I'm really just focusing on those color combinations. The fundamentals are the same, so I'm just drilling this over and over again. I got a comment recently that a lot of my stuff seems quite repetitive, but you know what? Painting like this is repetitive. When it comes to the fundamentals anyway. We're not going to get around tonal dynamics and color saturation. And at the end of the day, if we're trying to create a convincing sense of depth, then paying attention to those things is really important. So here, I'm focused on that intense saturation in the immediate foreground, that high contrast. Sure, a little bit of detail here and there really helps create that sense of depth versus that softer background. But overall, this is just supposed to be really loose, a shot from the hip, something kind of cool, but I can clearly see where that bigger composition has got to go. One painting down, I'm feeling pretty good. That one took me about an hour, so I'm going to bust out this one here of Mount Pembroke in the South Island of New Zealand. Now, you might recognize this mountain from Milford Sound. It's a beautiful, picturesque little scene here. What I really love is a selective use of light. So I'm going to have some really nice morning light shining on these mountains here in the distance. I love those desaturated violets that really help add to that depth. I'm using a small filbert brush for the vast majority of these color studies. It's helping me keep my marks nice and loose, and I'm only going to add a selective amount of detail. As usual, I'm thinking in terms of tone and working out where those brightest tones have got to be, and then planning accordingly throughout the painting, preserving that brightest bright for that intense highlight shining off the snow there in the distance. I'm then going to shade out a portion of the foreground, creating a bit more intensity with the saturation with some of those brighter greens. I am getting pretty excited though about painting that calm water and these tiny little details in the foreground. Is the composition perfect? Heck no, there's so much more I want to do to these little color studies, but it's a good start and it's a point to leap off from. Let's keep this train rolling, and here I'm painting a little scene of Mount Sefton. So this is near Mount Cook in the South Island of New Zealand. It's a really picturesque mountain, but I want to paint it with some drama and some atmosphere. So I use a combination of references here to get the right look. Again, I'm just focused on some structured brush marks given by that filbert bristle brush. What I love about this composition is the structure and pattern in some of those geological forms, and that nice bit of bottle green that we can achieve down there in the lake below. I also have more color out of my palette than I really should, but this is my way of planning for that bigger painting. I'll reduce this down to just the bare essentials when I start the final painting. By working small, I don't have very much invested in the design, and so I can be a little bit more adventurous with the composition. One of the things I enjoy thinking about is different sources of light and how atmosphere plays a role. I often like to illuminate areas within the composition where I want the viewer to pay attention, and I haze things out towards the edges, which really channels the attention into the center of the composition. Again, I save those darkest tones for the immediate foreground, and this helps us achieve that depth that we're looking for. Not every compositional study is a winner. This one was like pulling teeth, and it's not my favorite, but there might be an idea here to salvage. This is an area called the Dart River near Glenorchy in the South Island of New Zealand. It's a nice, bright, happy, mountainous scene. I might have to make it a bit more dramatic by having some epic thunderstorm behind those mountains. I don't know about this one. It might be just a little too sunny, and it's not doing anything for that dark and brooding artist persona I'm trying to cultivate. You can see here that I'm using a variety of references, and no one single picture is the impetus for the image. It might give me the spark of an idea, but I would never want to paint directly from one photograph. I like to use a multitude of references and really hash out an idea that's true to the experience that I had when I was here in the mountains. This rocky stream was photographed just down the road a ways from this location, but I thought it could make a really nice foreground element. In addition to those bristle filbert brushes, I'm using a couple of synthetics. This Eclipse and Evergreen long filbert are really handy for some more precise marks, as is an ivory round and an ivory flat. You'll find links to the brushes in the description box down below. In addition to the mountain series, I really want to work on these Venice scenes. It's been years and years since I went to Italy, and I've only been once, but I was so inspired by these tiny little canals and corners in Venice. The light here is quite different, and painting buildings is a really different experience for me as well. Linear perspective here in these compositions is going to play a key role. What I love about this little scene is just the quietness of it. The depth is halted with those buildings there just in the background, and it allows the viewer to concentrate on these elements that I want to paint in the foreground. So detail here is going to be a key component of this composition. But I want to stay away from any real tight brush marks here with this little color study and focus more on color and light. I think I missed the mark with the depth of tone over on the right-hand side. I want that building to be shaded out, but it doesn't really appear that way. It's registering as the same tone as the building over on the left. So I don't always get it right, but when I look at it from afar, I can see the changes that need to be made. And I'll pick this up either on the next pass or when it comes time to do another study. Still, it does clearly mark out the idea, and I can see where the painting's going. I think this will work, so I'm looking forward to painting it bigger. The late afternoon on some of these old buildings is just sublime. I love the reflecting water as well. So some of this atmosphere, I'm going to add in some nice thunderclouds in the background with that really beautiful subdued shadow. And then I just start working out the structure, the main forms and masses within those buildings. Not getting bogged down in any detail at all, despite the fact I'm using some pretty small brushes. We can travel pretty quickly, carving in those little windows with a flat ivory brush. But it's all about that combination, that patchwork of colors here, to see if this composition's going to work. I didn't start off with high hopes for this painting. It's a bit different for me, but when I was done, I was like, yeah, you know what? I think this one's going to work. So really excited about bringing this to life. I'm spending a bit more time on these little paintings of Venice. Each one of these has taken me anywhere between 2 to 3 hours. It's just because there's so much going on in them, and the architecture is quite a challenge to paint. Except for this little color study. Here I tried to really loosen up and just focus on the big, bold shapes, and not get too bogged down with those tiny little lines, as is my tendency. I start off with the best intentions, you see, but I always end up with that double zero pointed round. As I paint these color studies, I try to distill the idea down to a statement or a moment. I'm thinking about one thing about the composition that I really love, and for me, it's the light. It's the way that sun shines across the surface of the water, and we get that beautiful green glow just where the sun is striking the surface. And this is something I really want to amplify in that final composition. Now, the basilica is something that everybody paints. You'll find loads and loads of images on the internet of this very scene. And I thought I would give it a go, but after completing this color study, I decided, you know what? Maybe it's been done too much. I do love it. I think it can make a great painting, but I don't know. I want to paint something a little bit different. This is a really cool opportunity to paint some things that I've never gotten into before, like boats. You're going to see a few more boats coming up on my channel very shortly. And I'm quite interested in older boats, particularly sailboats and tall ships. They're really beautiful as a visual metaphor, and they add so much to a composition. And you might be thinking, yeah, Andrew, that's great, but there's no sailboat in this painting. Well, if you just squint, you can make one out just in the center to the left, right there in the distance. See it? Now that's a sail if I'm not mistaken. As part of the planning process, I'm thinking about tonal contrast as well. Light against dark, dark against light. So I'm thinking about the depth of the tone of the basilica dome against that bright sky, and also those lighter birds against the darker buildings. I hope you enjoyed that trip to Italy. Now let's hit the coast. And here, this is an idea that I've been thinking about for some years. It's a place called Cathedral Cove on the Victorian coast in Australia. Now in my references, I've got all sorts of angles of this cove, but nothing of the stack isolated right there in front of that sky. So a bit of artistic license has been used here. This is one of those compositions that didn't really work out for me. But it does have still something there that's worth working with. I just need to work out where to place the major focal points in the composition and still decide what is the painting about. There might be too much going on. Maybe the trick will be more contrast and going for a deeper tonal dynamic throughout. Maybe make that storm cloud in the distance a bit heavier. That could do the trick. Now, I've painted this scene a few times before. It's Albany, right down in the very bottom of Western Australia. The afternoon light here is so special. It's just got a really crisp, beautiful quality to it, and the way those brilliant blue waves glow. It's something I want to capture in this painting. So even though I've painted this scene before, I thought I could do a better job drawing on some of the experience that I've gathered over the last decade. Now, I'll never paint the same scene twice exactly the same. I try to make every composition unique, but sometimes similar imagery will come up. I wasn't ready to turn loose of this idea. There's something really special about it. This scene is located on the Wellington coast. It's called Ephedra Bay. Some really beautiful green quality comes through these waves, and I love the arrangement of rocks in the foreground. This is a really challenging composition because it's all about those transitioning tones from the darkest darks in the immediate foreground to those rocks in the midground right before they meet that crashing wave. I'm really excited about the final version of this painting because painting that sea spray is going to be quite a challenge. I've got a few different ideas about how I might tackle this. And notice here, for such a small painting, we're getting quite a lot of information down. Still, I'm keeping those shadows and darker tones nice and thin. The use of synthetics helps here, and building up a bit more thickness with that paint in some of the lighter areas. I love painting wet rocks. The trick to getting these to look wet is concentrating the highlight to a tiny little pinpoint of light. I apply these with a 00 round. I know, I can't help myself. I made a painting a couple of years ago called the Unbridled Sea, which I then made a print of, but here I wanted to revisit this idea in the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand. There's a beautiful silvery, hazy light in the atmosphere here on this particular day, and I love those jagged rocks. So what I want is a nice bottle green wave coming in to meet these rocks in the foreground. This is all going to be about that gradation from these brighter, more intense values here in the foreground and that saturated color, fading that out as it goes into the distance. We don't have a whole lot of depth to play with, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge creating the sense of atmosphere that I want to achieve. I'm super excited about this composition though. I think it's going to make an awesome painting. My favorite part of this whole process is peeling off that masking tape. You really feel like you've achieved something looking at all these tiny little color studies. And as you can see, the right side of the board is looking a little empty, so I've got more color studies that I'm going to be doing. This was such a fun project, and now I can really clearly visualize the direction I want to go in with my paintings. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It has been such a pleasure sharing this time with you in the studio. Once again, if you liked this video, then click that like button for me. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel and click that notification bell so you're notified when I upload another video. Now, I'm going to continue with the series that you've seen here. Probably starting with that Venice series, I'm going to be working on some sketches, maybe a few of those Sketch Zone digital designs. Also, just getting back to the drawing board and doing it old school with graphite, white chalk, maybe some charcoal as well. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to work these ideas up, and this is really what I want to focus on in 2022. There's a lot of work ahead of me, but I hope you'll join me and come along on this journey and see what we can find out together and learn together here. 2022, this is our year to really just get after it, get painting, and develop our skills. So I hope you'll join me over on Patreon and take your skills even further over there. Again, you can find that by clicking that link down below. Now I'm going to get out of here and get back to painting. In the meantime, check out this epic horse video or a digital design video right there. Make sure you subscribe to this channel by clicking right there. Okay, I'll see you soon.